Chapter 30. They Cross the Line. Zurich at midnight felt like a city made of clockwork and cold glass. From the balcony of our penthouse suite at the Borough Lac, I could hear the distant chime of church bells, a reminder that time was a luxury I no longer controlled. Tomorrow morning, the world would gather at the Grand Hall. Tomorrow morning, I would take the stage with Maya and dismantle 30 years of my own family's history. I would stand in front of the global press, the Swiss authorities, and the remaining shadows of the Blackwood Board, and I would tell them that my father was a thief and my mother was a conspirator. I would be ending the Blackwood era, and I would be doing it gladly. I felt the sliding glass door move behind me. The scent of jasmine, soft, persistent, and now fundamentally a part of my own breathing, drifted into the cold night air. Maya stepped onto the balcony, wrapping a thick cashmere robe around herself. "You're going to freeze," she said softly. "I needed the clarity," I replied, turning to look at her. She looked ethereal in the moonlight. The stress of the last few days, the revelation about Leo Mercer, the flight to Zurich, the confrontation, had left her with a sharp, luminous intensity. She didn't look like the girl who had been cornered by debt anymore. She looked like the woman who was about to inherit the future. "Are you ready?" she asked, stepping up beside me. Our shoulders brushed, and the familiar spark of electricity shot through me, grounding me in a way the billionaire title never could. "I've been ready since the moment I saw you in that green dress, Maya. I just didn't know it yet." I took her hand, my fingers interlacing with hers. "I'm not the man who owns the room anymore, but standing here with you, I feel like I finally have a reason to want the room." "We're crossing the line tomorrow, Alexander," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the dark lake below. "There's no going back after the summit. You won't be the billionaire CEO. You'll be the man who turned on his own blood." "I'm turning toward the light," I said, my voice a low, steady vibration. "For 15 years, I thought the Blackwood name was my armor. I didn't realize it was my cage. You're the one who showed me the door." I turned her toward me, my hands finding her waist. The heavy silk of her robe was a barrier I wanted to remove, but more than that, I wanted to remove the last of the distance between us. Not just the physical distance, but the emotional line we had been dancing around since New York. "Tonight," I murmured, my forehead resting against hers. "No board meetings, no journals, no Mercers, just us." "Just us," she agreed, her voice a ragged breath. I claimed her mouth then, a slow, deep, soul-searing kiss that tasted of the Swiss night and the promise of the morning. This wasn't a kiss of possession or protection. It was a kiss of absolute, mutual surrender. We were crossing the line. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the fallout. Maya POV. The hotel suite was a world of shadows and soft amber light. As Alexander led me back inside, the click of the balcony door closing felt like the final seal on our past lives. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The air between us was heavy with a decade of unsaid things and 3 weeks of intense, world-shaking desire. He stopped in the center of the room, his eyes fixed on mine. They weren't the cold, calculating gray of a businessman. They were dark, dilated, and filled with a raw, unshielded vulnerability. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my throat, lingering on the bruises that were now almost gone. A ghost of a memory, a reminder of why we were here. "I love you, Maya," he whispered. "Not because of the code, not because of the fight. I love you because you're the only person who ever saw the man I was trying so hard to hide." "I love you too, Alexander," I said, my voice shaking. "I love the man who was brave enough to let the Titan die." I reached for the buttons of his shirt. My hands were steady now, fueled by a clarity I hadn't known I possessed. I wanted him. Not just the heat of his body or the power of his touch, but the totality of him. I wanted to cross the final line where we stopped being separate people and became a single, unbreakable force. The shirt fell to the floor. I ran my hands over the hard, corded muscles of his chest, feeling the frantic beat of his heart under my palms. He groaned, a deep primal sound, and pulled me flush against him. The silk of my robe was a thin, fleeting barrier. He picked me up, my legs wrapping around his waist, and carried me to the bed. The white linen looked like a blank page, waiting for us to write the first chapter of our real story. As he laid me down, the moonlight from the window cast him in silver and shadow. He looked like a god, but as he leaned down to kiss me, I felt the warmth of his breath, the slight tremor in his hands. He was a man, my man. "No more contracts," he murmured against my lips. "No more secrets," I replied. The intimacy that followed was different than the frantic heat of the office or the desperate surrender of the jet. It was a slow, sensory exploration of the life we were building. He touched me as if I were made of glass, his mouth finding every inch of my skin with a reverence that made my eyes sting. He mapped my body with his tongue, a slow, agonizingly beautiful journey that made the world outside the hotel vanish. I reached for him, my fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer. I wanted to feel every part of him. I wanted to be consumed by the fire we had started. When he finally moved inside me, I felt a surge of emotion so intense it was almost a physical pain. It wasn't just pleasure, it was a merging of souls. In the dark of the Zurich night, surrounded by the wreckage of our empires, we finally crossed the line. We weren't the boss and the advisor. We weren't the billionaire and the debtor. We were Alexander and Maya. And for the first time, that was enough. Alexander POV. I watched her sleep in the pre-dawn light. Her face was peaceful, the tension of the last month finally smoothed away by the exhaustion of our love. I stayed awake, my arm draped across her waist, watching the way the gray light of the Alps began to touch the room. I felt a clarity I had never known. For years, I had measured my life by the locked-in philosophy, securing assets, hedging risks, ensuring that nothing I valued could ever leave me. I had treated love like a hostile takeover. But as I looked at Maya, I realized that the only way to truly own something is to be willing to lose it. I had given her her freedom, I had given her the company, and I had given her my truth. And in return, she had chosen to stay. The power had shifted, yes, but it hadn't gone from me to her. It had dissolved into something else entirely. I reached out and touched the ring on her finger. It looked right there. It didn't look like a symbol of my wealth, it looked like a symbol of our alliance. A chime sounded from the nightstand. My phone, I picked it up expecting Marcus or a last-minute threat from my mother, but it was a notification from the clinic. Patient Sterling, rapid increase in neural activity. Consciousness confirmed. Vocalization attempted. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. He was awake. Maya's father, the man whose dreams had been the fuel for the Blackwood machine, was back. I looked at Maya. I wanted to wake her. I wanted to tell her that the miracles were starting. But I stopped. She needed this rest. She had a mountain to climb today. I got out of bed and walked to the window. The sun was just beginning to hit the tops of the mountains, turning the snow to gold. The city was waking up. The summit was hours away. I sat at the desk and opened the notebook Maya had been writing in. I picked up a pen and on the first page, beneath her elegant, clinical script, I wrote 5 words. The line is crossed, together. Maya POV 6:00 a.m. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of the shower. I sat up, the sheets pooling around my waist. My body felt heavy, a dull, sweet ache in my core that reminded me of everything we had shared in the dark. I looked at the window. The sky was a brilliant, cold blue. Alexander stepped out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist. He looked at me, and I saw the shift. The man from last night was still there in his eyes, the vulnerability, the love, but there was a new layer of iron. He was ready. "Good morning," he said, his voice a low, warm melody. "Good morning." I reached for my robe, but he was already there, holding it for me. "I have news," he said, his expression serious. "The clinic called. Your father is conscious, Maya." He tried to speak. I felt the air leave my lungs. "He's awake, truly awake." "Yes," Dr. Vogel said, "he's stable. He's asking for you." I felt a sob of relief break through my chest. I threw my arms around Alexander's neck, burying my face in his shoulder. Everything, the theft, the scandal, the war, it all felt worth it in that moment. My father was back. "We'll go to him after the summit," Alexander whispered. "We'll go to him and tell him that his legacy is safe, that the Sterling name is finally back where it belongs." "We'll tell him together," I said, pulling back to look at him. "Together." Alexander POV. The Grand Hall was a cathedral of marble and media. As we arrived in the black Mercedes, the crowd was already a roar. This wasn't the polite press of New York or the scholarly interest of the London summits. This was a global event. The Blackwood fallout was the only story that mattered. I stepped out of the car and offered my hand to Maya. She stepped out into the light, wearing a suit of crisp, brilliant white. She looked like a beacon. I was in my usual charcoal, but I had removed the Blackwood crest from my tie. I was just a man standing next to the woman who owned the room. We walked through the gauntlet of cameras. The questions were a tidal wave, but we didn't stop. We walked into the hall, our heads held high, our hands interlaced. At the far end of the hall, on the stage, my mother was waiting. Eleanor Blackwood looked like a queen on the edge of a revolution. She was surrounded by the remaining loyalists of the board, her face a mask of cold, regal defiance. She saw us approaching, and I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew the line had been crossed. "Alexander," she said as we reached the stage. Her voice was a chill in the room. "I see you've brought your partner. I trust you're here to sign the settlement papers and end this nonsense." "I'm here to end the nonsense, Mother," I said, my voice ringing through the hall. "But I'm not signing anything. I'm presenting the truth." I turned to Maya. She stepped to the podium, her briefcase in her hand. The hall went silent. Every camera in the world was focused on the girl who had been locked in. "My name is Maya Sterling," she began, her voice steady and clear. "And 30 years ago, my father, Dr. Arthur Sterling, made a discovery that was meant to change the world. Instead, it was stolen. It was used to build an empire of lies and coercion. But today, the debt is being called." She opened her briefcase and pulled out the 1994 journals. She held them up for the world to see. "These are the original records of the neural mapping algorithm. They contain the forged signatures of Arthur Blackwood and the proof of a betrayal that involves the Mercer Group, the Knight Group, and the woman sitting behind me." The hall erupted. Eleanor stood up, her face pale with rage. "This is a lie. Those journals were destroyed." "You should have checked the vault more carefully, Eleanor," I said, stepping up to the podium beside Maya. "Because a Blackwood always finds a way to get what he wants, and what I want today is justice." I looked at the board members. I looked at the press. I looked at the world. I have officially resigned as the CEO of Blackwood Industries. I have signed over every share, every patent, and every asset to the Sterling Trust. I am here today not as a billionaire, but as a witness. A witness to the truth that Maya Sterling is the rightful owner of this legacy, and the witness to the fact that the Blackwood era of theft and control is over. I turn to my mother. The Swiss authorities are waiting in the wings, Mother. You can leave with dignity, or you can leave in chains. The choice is yours, but you will never touch this company or this woman again. Maya POV. The aftermath of the summit was a storm of a different kind. The fallout was instantaneous. Elinor was led away by the Swiss police. The board was dismantled by the afternoon. The Mercer Group's stock vanished into the abyss. But as Alexander and I walked out of the Grand Hall and toward the Herslinden Clinic, the world felt quiet. The noise of the press and the corporate war was just a distant hum. We reached my father's room. He was sitting up, propped against the pillows. He was still thin, still fragile, but his eyes were open. They were the same hazel as mine, filled with a sharp, intelligent clarity. He looked at me, then at Alexander. He saw our joined hands. He saw the ring on my finger. "Maya," he whispered, his voice a raspy, beautiful sound. "I'm here, Dad." I knelt by the bed, taking his hand. We did it. The journals, everyone knows. The company is ours again. My father looked at Alexander. I saw the flash of the old fear, the memory of Arthur Blackwood. But then he looked at me. He saw the peace in my face. He saw the way Alexander was holding my shoulder, his grip protective and humble. He is not. "Him," my father whispered, pointing at Alexander. "No," I said, a tear finally escaping. "He's the man who saved us. He's the man I love." My father looked at Alexander for a long time. Finally, he gave a slow, shaky nod. He reached out and placed his other hand over ours. The line had been crossed. The past had been forgiven. The future was ours to write. Alexander POV, midnight, Zurich. I stood on the balcony of the hotel suite, looking out at the mountains. Maya was inside, finally sleeping the sleep of the truly free. Her father was recovering. The company was hers. The world was at peace. I looked at my hands. They were empty of the billionaire's tools. I had no phone, no staff, no empire. I had never felt more powerful. I walked back into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked at Maya, the woman who had conquered the Titan and found the man. I realized then that Act II wasn't just about the fire. It was about the forge. It was about the process of becoming who we were meant to be. I reached into the nightstand and pulled out the blank notebook. I looked at the first page, where I had written "The line is crossed." Together. I picked up the pen, and on the second page, I wrote the first line of Act III, "The woman who owns him." I lay down beside her, pulling her close. The silence of the Zurich night was no longer cold. It was the sound of a new beginning. We were locked in. But for the first time, the door was wide open, and the world was ours to explore. Together. Next chapter, Chapter 31, Consequences.